It's time to save time and space all over again, for in this review, we're taking a look at The Loop from Pandasaurus Games. In this cooperative game, you will work together as agents from a time agency, trying to foil the evil plans of Dr. Faux and his new time machine. In this game, you will be moving your piece from different time periods in order to gather energy to complete loops, to defeat clones, get rid of these rift cubes, as well as complete 4 missions before the evil Dr. Faux and his new time machine are able to cause too many problems. On your turn, before anything starts, Dr. Faux himself is going to mess around with the board. First, there are clones. The number of clones you add depend on which round you're in. They come from this cute little bag, and when you draw one, for example, you look at the back, that's where it goes, and the front tells you how to defeat it in essence. We'll get to that a little bit later. You're also going to add an artifact. You're going to draw the top card of the artifact deck, look at what era it belongs in, and add it there. Now, he's going to flip over this deck of cards. This is going to tell you what era he's going to be pointing in. You see, this is his time machine is a cute little, I guess, dice tower, cube tower. You're not dropping dice in this. And you're going to drop a number of cubes equal to 2 plus the number of his evil clones in that era. You're going to drop them into the top, and they're going to fill out into one of the 3 areas, the center one which he faced and the 2 adjacent to it. Now, if at any time an era has more than 3 cubes into it, that means you have created a vortex. You lose the mission there, face up or face down, and you add a vortex tile. If another vortex would appear where a vortex is, or you need to add a 4th one, that is one of the ways the game ends. You will also lose if that deck I showed earlier, which shows you what area he's pointing, if he cycles through that deck 3 times, that's it. He's caused too many problems, and once again, you have lost. Finally, it'll be your turn to act. So you will have a 1 tile, which has your unique character, as well as a power, as well as a deck of cards and an open hand. Your hand will consist of 3 cards face up on the table so everyone can see what everyone else has. On your turn, you're going to have plenty of different actions you can take, but really they depend on what's in your hand. You see, the artifact cards will tell you what you can pretty much do on your turn. To use one, you pretty much exhaust it, turning it sideways, and do its effect. However, even though there is a large variety of artifact cards, including the 6 starter ones for a character, they all pretty much fall into basic 4 action categories. The first one is moving. To move, simply move to an adjacent sector, or to anyone if the artifact allows it. This is pretty basic, and in fact, your main tile gives you 1 free movement per turn if you really need that extra bit of movement. Now, in addition to that, there's energy cubes on the board. One of the things they can be used is you can spend 1 in your era to move again as well. Next up, speaking of those energy, is adding energy. Take a green cube and add it to wherever it says. Sometimes it's in your era, sometimes it could be the era you're adjacent to. Then, of course, there are those nasty rift cubes that Dr. Faux was dropping. You can usually remove those and possibly remove from other sectors. This is a great way to make sure that none of those vortices are created. Finally, there are the clones I brought up before. You see, as I stated before, the more clones in era, the more likely it's going to drop more rift cubes. But you have the ability to either push or pull them, pretty much pulling them away or towards you into an era. If they ever go into the era matching the monocle in their eye, they are defeated. So this is really important to try to get guys as close to the era as possible and maybe defeat multiple at once. While you're doing all this, there are these mission tiles up here. They may require you to do specific actions like adding or removing cubes in certain eras. This one, for example, is adding 1 in different eras themselves, while this one is specifically in this era. Complete 4 of those and you've won the game. But there's always the one other extra action, and that's the name of the game, doing a loop. You see, artifacts come in 4 different dimensions, pretty much types. And on your turn, if there's energy in your zone, you can spend it to do a loop. You choose a dimension type and you unexhaust all artifacts you have of that type. Do note you can only choose 1, so in this case, I could not do all 3. In fact, this one, the black hole, are unique and they can never be looped. They're usually stronger. This allows you to once again use artifacts over, having much bigger turns. You can do multiple loops in a turn, but each loop costs 1 more. So their first loop is 1 energy, second loop is 2, 3 is 3, so on and so forth. Now, in order to get more artifacts to do looping, when you end your turn in a zone after you've done all your actions, you've said you're done. If there are any artifacts in that era, you take it and add it to the top of your deck. So when you refresh and get a new hand, you're going to get that new artifact right away. No waiting required. That's the basic gameplay loop here. You're pretty much going to be going around this board, making sure that too many rift cubes don't appear, creating too many vortices, or you don't take too long that too many cycles happen, and then Dr. Faux just wins. If you're able to complete those 4 missions, you've won. But what I did tell you was the basic rule set called Sabotage. They have other game modes you actually choose here. For example, this has the other side has the Saiyan Super clones. They usually have some other little mechanics, which I'll get to, but all of them still require a number of missions to be completed, so it's basically built off of this game mode. And this is a cooperative game, like I said, and the idea is that it has your cube management that we've seen on things like Pandemic, but with the artifacts you can collect here, it's also got a slight deck building element to it. But more often than not, you're not going to be getting like a lot of cards per turn. So usually you're going to be a bit more pickier with what cards you get, but you're still going to have a lot of fun, especially those loops, because the idea behind this is you're deck building those symbols. And when you spread enough energy around, in fact, what tends to happen sometimes is you might be dropping energy, but maybe if someone's like, oh, can you put this energy in this area? Because now I'm going to start here, do a loop, move here, do a second loop, then like being able to go here and clear out this entire mission or something. So it becomes a lot more, I think, forward planning when you're discussing players and being like, hey, can I take this energy? Or are you playing? I'm like, oh, I want to use that for a loop next round. I'm like, okay, I didn't need that too much. And for the most part, that means there's a bit more communication, I feel, because luckily I like that they have the open hand, because I played plenty of cooperative games where you're like, you have hands and you have to work together, but you can't show each other hands. Like, look, you have it. You know what they can do next turn. So if you see that, like, for example, this person can kill and take out a clone in an era, just that's what this artifact does. You're like, okay, I don't need to worry about this guy because you'll probably do it on your turn. At the same time, if you see someone who can't move at all or can't remove any of the rift cubes, so if you already see some rift cubes here and you're like, I really should take care of that because I know you can't on your turn, and depending on how he lands, we may be in trouble. That said, while he's a bit random, like over here, even if I'm dropping 2 cubes, I don't know where in the 3 areas it could go. It could go like that, for example. But as you can see, for example, the 3 cards I drawn out, because of the way those are laid out, I know for the rest of the round, no matter what cards are drawn, this one will not get any more cubes because it won't be here because his cards are already drawn. The orange one is already drawn, so it won't go there, and the red's already been drawn. So as cards come out, you can do a bit of planning, knowing like this is now a safe zone for at least 4 turns, so we don't need to worry about that probably too much. And of course, unique powers, very nice and fun. And they are pretty significant, I would say. And weirdly enough, they give them difficulties. I don't think with the exception of this one, it requires a bit more planning, this character, but I don't say they're difficult as much as make for an easier game, because the ones that are low difficulty are actually really powerful, to me at least. But that, of course, will be your own judgment. Now, in terms of those other game modes, they are important because I feel like they add other elements that maybe have to change up the game in ways you would like. For example, the Saiyan Super clones add these big, scary clones that, when killed, burst into a lot of clones. But when they die, they leave these perpetual energy cubes, which you can use for energy over and over again. So hypothetically, if you're here, you can do your first loop spending this, it stays there. Then do your second loop spending both of these, that stays there. And then spend that loop energy again to move. So it allows for more combo-y turns. And some of the other ones, this one adds centrifuges that make things much more complicated depending on which artifacts are around. And this deck is one I think is probably one of the most important for people because, like I said, there is some planning, but I can see some people being not enjoying the randomness of how he can be over here and over here. This game mode, pretty much, he always goes in a circle. And every time he loops from the end of time to the beginning of time, you flip over some cards from here, which add bad effects, but there are ways to get rid of them as well. So it makes for a much more predictable game. And of course, all of them allow for different difficulties that make things harder. For example, adding super vortices, in which if you end your turn there, bad things happen. You lose. So don't end there. And of course, there's the solo mode, which does something a little bit interesting I like because of the deck building. You actually will control a number of characters, 2 to 4, depending on what you want to give it a go with, but you don't have separate decks for them. So it's not like when you play multiple hands, if you've played any other game and you just tactically play like a 2-player game, but you control 2 players. You will actually have one deck, and when you shuffle up and deal out cards, I'm actually going to take a couple more basics in here. When you flip over a card, if it doesn't belong to anyone, you can choose who it goes to. But let's say you find one that does belong to someone, has to go to them. Once someone has 3 cards, that triggers who you're going to play that next round. So it becomes a bit more like, oh, I really need Mr. Time to go off. So anything that's not his, I'm going to give to him. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, he'll activate. Or, of course, it makes things much more easier to be like, I'm going to put the stars on him. So he'll have more likely of a stronger loop. That loop is a lot of fun when you get to combo. If you like comboing, this game offers it in a reasonable pace. But there are times when you're like, you're just going to get a hand of completely unique cards. And you're going to be like, oh, well, my loop only untaps one thing, which stinks. It's more prevalent, luckily, in the, I feel, the single player mode, because sometimes you just flip out things like that. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Just it definitely hurts if it doesn't feel fun, if you can't exhaust the, like, well, I'll only exhaust the one. Which is why I feel like when you're playing in the multiplayer, it becomes a lot more fun because you're discussing, like, I probably wouldn't have this because I know that someone else is already collecting a lot of the stars, so I'm going to make sure they pick that up. Crits and misses for the loop. Crits. Gaining artifact cards as well as looping them allow you to not only get more powers as the game progresses, but more enjoyable turns as you do a very strong combo with multiple loops of the same artifact type. There is a good balance being able to plan ahead, seeing what areas he's already been to, and being able to predict where he could drop cubes, as well as randomness from when the cubes actually go in the tower and could land all in one sector or spread out. This allows for people to be able to plan ahead a bit and still feel like they have some control, while also keeping up the tension of being unsure where the game is going to go next. The alternate rule sets, including the solo mode, allow you to customize the game in a way to emphasize what you enjoy about it, whether that's having more combos and crazy turns, or maybe a more predictable game. Misses. Losses can still come out of nowhere. I've had a match where I had a zone that was completely clear, but in one turn added 4 cubes and lost me the game. While it is rare that you can straight up lose, it is a bit more common that you could lose a mission that is face up, which is a bit more annoying, especially if you were just about to complete it. The variety of artifacts are great and it's fun to use them, but sometimes, because all your actions are attached to them, you won't be able to do what you need to do on your turn. If you have plenty of actions to let you deal with clones, but what you need to do is remove rifts, you can feel like you had a turn where you couldn't do much. This is a lighter cooperative game, and I think because of that, in our Discord, when I was looking into this, someone asked, do I think this would replace Pandemic? And after playing it, I don't think it does, because I can see the comparisons. Both of them are cube management, but the player powers, I think, are what separate them, and in a way that I think will come down to your taste. In Pandemic, while you have the powers like the researcher or the scientist, and you maybe do things a little bit easier, for the most part, everyone has the same thing. You always can move, you can always remove a cube, so on and so forth. In this, however, I feel like with the cards, because your actions are so heavily dependent on the cards, you can't guarantee that. But it also means you are almost leveling up as the game progresses, getting stronger artifacts. And of course, obviously, the fact that they go on top of your deck, so you pretty much get them next turn, makes things a lot more enjoyable. I feel the difference is, while both of them are taking on the same opponent, being the cube management of rifts versus diseases, this one, the loop, treats it more like an RPG where you're leveling up to get different skills and you are speccing in different classes, in this case, different item dimensions, so you can have stronger loops. While Pandemic feels a bit more like a platformer, you have really all your tools from the start, and it's really how you react to the level. So I don't think it's a replacement as much as, like I said, a new look in a way that I find pretty enjoyable. And I will say, as a bonus, the loop has all those different game modes right from the bat, so you can emphasize. Like I said, I think this one, the one that makes things more predictable, and he rotates around, is going to be one that a lot of people like because I know randomness is always a thing that can bother people. The one thing I'm very curious about, because I liked it, but I can see other people not liking it, was the open hands. Because in Pandemic, I'm always annoyed. That's the one thing I would say over this. That you have a hidden hand and you're like, do you have this? I'm like, I have a red card, but this you see right away. Now, the fear would be, and maybe for some people this has happened, that it can cause a lot of alpha gaming. That someone can be like, all right, you have those cards, you do this. You have those cards, you do this. But for us, because one, you don't know exactly where he's going to place, and for all you know, you're like, I'll be fine as long as he doesn't drop into the green sector. And there you go. But what would happen more often was, because I can look at the hand and be like, can you get rid of this thing? You'd still ask them and be like, yeah, I was going to go this way, but sure, I can go over here and get rid of this guy. And be like, great. So that gives me this time to go here. You don't mind if I loop here? And like, oh no, I need that energy though if I want to go over there. Okay, I'll leave that alone. I won't loop with that. So it seemed like usually not the entire video will definitely discuss when gaining artifacts, because that was another fun part, we'd be like, oh, I'll get all the spirals. My guy starts with some spirals anyway. What I enjoyed was it usually was player A and B usually rotating around, like pretty much your turn and the person next to you discussing what you were going to do on your turn and the next turn. So there was still some planning going wrong, and it would rotate around. That said, I do feel like 3 was probably my favorite player count, because it gave someone, like, it wasn't a back and forth and you interact with multiple people, and 4 would like waiting maybe a bit too long between turns, because you do the whole point of this, if you have a good turn, is you take a long one. Not too long, luckily, but long enough that I think it's something to watch out for. A quick thing also, this is not unique to the loop, but we enjoyed it. They have achievements at the bottom of the box here for not only doing positive things, but doing negative things, as well as completing the game. And if you notice there, I've only been able to complete these games on the basic modes. I've yet to beat it on the Employee of the Year or Eternity difficulty levels. But the other cute thing was behavior assessments for both, and there were things that are not related to the game itself. Technically, it'd be like wearing a bow tie or listening to soundtracks that involve time travel. It's a cute thing, and I technically haven't. I don't know why. I think because if you buy it from their site, or we get it at a convention center, they give you stickers. So I was maybe a bit more attuned to it, because I know Calico, for example, had achievements, but I haven't done that. I don't think Jonathan has. It's a cute, fun thing. Just be aware if you do those, like, make sure someone who's already played the game before is keeping track of it. That way they sort of know, and you don't spend too much time on that. I would say they're fun, but don't let it slow down your game too much. Focus on the game itself. There is a lot here to offer, and you're going to have a lot of fun if you don't mind Dr. Faux suddenly having a brilliant plan and being able to take you out quickly. So that is the loop. You can let me know what your thoughts are on this. Do you think it's a fun game that should dare rival Pandemic? Do you think it's not even close? You can let me know in those comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit. Hey there, thank you so much for watching our video. Please, if you can, hit that like and subscribe. It really helps out a lot. And check out our Patreon. There we have a lot of cool stuff, including a Discord and a second part to our podcast. If you just want to hear the free one, don't worry. You can check out our board game podcast, which releases weekly, in the links down below.